2004 Grand Prix white in here. We're going to pull the OEM hardtop off, make it easier to get started on the work. We'll be doing some carbon bits and pieces on this car, including a new steering wheel, sliding trim pieces, shift knob, door handles, a lot of cool stuff. So stay tuned. We'll show you how to get it done. Oh, the you unlocked everything? Yeah, that's the fun. You want to set it right back here, right behind it? Yeah. Always amazed how light the sun is. Everybody's toolbox needs a 10mm wrench. You can take apart half the Hondas this way. But yeah, first step, always disconnect the battery. We don't want to trigger any airbag lights. So disconnect the battery, let it sit for maybe a minute or so before we start pulling the airbag out. Man, your engine bay is so clean. Looks so good. All right, so we disconnected the battery. The first thing we're gonna do is pull the airbag off this wheel. To do that, you just need a standard T30. So I got T30s in two types. I got my small one and my power one to make it quicker. When you guys are doing this, there's really nothing to it. There's two clips, and these clips, you don't even need screwdrivers or anything. Just use your fingernail and just pull these out. And there's two plastic clips. When these clips are removed, you're gonna see where the T30 bits are. There's one on the left side and one on the right side. So let's do the right one since the camera's on this side first. Okay, so just gonna pop this out. You can see it just comes right out with my finger. We're just gonna remove the T30. Just make sure you take your time and make sure that bit is solid in there, because you don't want to strip these, because if you do strip it, it's gonna be really, really hard to fix it later. So make sure it's in nice and tight, like this one is tight, and just give it a firm grip and loosen it. And then we'll do the same for the other side. Take the airbag out, kind of pull it back a little, but not too far. The clip is actually the yellow wire you're gonna go after. So we're gonna snap it out, and I'm just gonna pull this little thing out. And once it's out, I like to bring it out in front of me, bring the wires all the way out. So when it's out here, all you gotta do is just press on this thing. So you press all the way up, and then it'll release. That's it. That's how you take your airbag out. All right, so we're gonna set this aside, make sure you don't scratch the cover. And then from here, we're just gonna, so we got the 14mm. We're gonna remove the 14mm nut. Okay, this thing's a little tight, so hold it with one hand, push down with the other, and that'll break it loose. Once it's loose, you can take it apart. All right. Now on some cars, they actually have a guide mark on the shaft, which tells you to line up the steering wheel. On the Hondas, they don't have it. So what I like to do is I like to make it so it's center. Look at it with center. Take a Sharpie and just mark the middle of the wheel in the middle of the hub. That way you just have a reference point. So later when you put the other wheel on, we use that as a reference point. So once that's marked, now you notice the wheel is pretty tight. It's not gonna come off that easily, see? It's pretty tight. So what I do is just take it and kind of wiggle it a little bit, and it'll slowly separate it from the spline. You see it starts to loosen, now it's loose, see? So you take it out, put one hand back here and hold the ribbon cable. You don't pull out the ribbon cable. Slowly pull the wires out, one at a time. When all the wires are out, that breaks free the wheel. Here's your ribbon cable. So you leave this thing alone, don't touch that. And that's your wheel. So now we go on the workbench, we can do the rest. All right, so we're on the workbench here, so we can show you how the wheel swap is done. This was the wheel we just removed from the car. This car is actually in really good shape. I mean, look at the leather on this thing. This is a 2004, so that's like, what, 15 years old? I mean, it looks perfect, right? But this is the stock wheel. This is the wheel that we spec'd out. We got the black Alcantara, black stitching. We did the flat top and the flat bottom, and we made the gloss carbon on the top and bottom. The cool thing about this wheel is we added the knurled grips to the back, so you get that feel when you're gripping it that you don't have, or we actually do have it on the stock wheel. So you have the knurled grip on both. I didn't know the stock one had it. Okay, so here's what we do to remove it. You're gonna need some basic tools, Allen key, Phillips screwdriver. So the first thing we want to do is remove this frame. This frame is held in by nothing more than 3 hex bits. So just loosen these 3 bits. Usually they're pretty tight, so I use the wrench first, and then I use this ball joint, and we'll take these off. This apparatus, if you're wondering, is actually the horn, because each of these 3 are mounted on a spring, so when you press on the airbag, this depresses and it makes contact with the metal, and that's how your stock horn works. because the airbag is actually attached to this part right here, or it sits right on top of it. So we're gonna take this off first. So this is kind of like your horn mechanism. So there's three bolts. We take it off. You see there's springs on the back of them. So the springs allow it to compress, and then it makes contact. So set that piece aside. The next thing is, once that's out, there's 4 Phillips. So these are easy. We're just gonna remove these. There's 2 at the bottom. And these screws hold basically the back plastic plate, as well as on the top. It does double duty. It also holds the plastic trim here. So we're gonna take this off and you'll see how it all comes apart. So remove this piece. This is the horn contact. Those are the contact points on the horn. So this piece comes out. Now the back plastic will almost fall out. The only reason it's not falling out is because the cruise control is fitting in place. So there's 2 more Phillips bolts. These are machine bolts. So these are self-tapping. These are machine bolts. These 2, take them out, and you see the cruise control comes out automatically. So we're gonna take the cruise out, set this aside. Now the plastic will just lift off. Remove your 2 little cruise control bolts, take those out. So now the wheel looks exactly the same, side by side. So we're gonna set this wheel aside. We're gonna transfer all the components to this wheel now. First thing to do, flip it upside down. Reverse, put the 2 cruise control bolts in. Oops. Then the black plastic goes in. So you always have to attach the cruise control before you do the other part. So you kind of set this thing in here, make sure everything sits nice. And this thing, put it through the hole. And then what you want to do is you want to line the bolts up with these 2 bolts. Again, these are machine bolts. So take your time when you're doing this. Make sure it lines up with the bolts, and I'll flip it around. I'll show you what I mean. Over on this side, you see how the 2 holes lined up here. So you want them right on top of the machine screw. So when you got it right, keep pressure on it, hold it up, and then you're going to tighten it from the back side. There's 1. There's 2. So once those are tightened, cruise control's back on. Now the plastic's in place. You can flip it over. Now everything's back the way it was before. So the first thing you do, lay down the horn. Make sure there's 2 little guide nubs on this thing. So make sure they line up there, so they sit perfectly in there like that. And then you put the, this is the bracket for the cruise control. 1 bolt there, 1 bolt there. You put these back on. And we do the 2 bottom ones. Now if you guys like this screwdriver I'm using, this is a Dewalt Gyroscopic Screwdriver. So when you press the button, nothing really happens. But when you turn it, it moves in the direction you want. So it's kind of cool. I have a link to this on my description page if you guys want to purchase it. It's on Amazon, but it's a Dewalt Gyroscopic Screwdriver. It's perfect for jobs like this. And then, okay, last thing, you want the cruise control. So first thing, we're going to put the cruise control in. Just make sure it's all sitting in the right place. This is important because this cable has to go underneath this thing. So you got to make sure that goes under and this thing goes over. Okay, if you do it the other way around, then you're going to wonder why the cable's sticking out all over the place. So these, you just line up the holes where it was before, and you tighten this thing in. Now make sure you do this by hand first, because this is a machine screw. If you use a power screwdriver and you cross thread it, then you're in big trouble. So do it by hand first, and then you can use a power driver if you want to, but this is not a big deal, so I just do it by hand. Okay, so we're going to hand tighten all 3. Okay, so once it's all tight, we're going to use the Allen to tighten it, and then you're done. When done properly, this thing should be able to compress. So if you test it, press down, you hear the click, that means that's your horn right there. So you did it all correctly. So cruise control's in, plugs there, wheels all done. Looks pretty good. The flat bottom's nice, gives you a little more added leg room. So we're gonna get this back in the car and you'll see how it looks. Cool. All right, so okay, we're back in the car again. So remember the ribbon cable. Be gentle with this, but you want to get the cables and then feed them all through this bottom hole right here. So we're going to start with the big plug, the gray one, and then we'll feed the yellow, the black round plug, and then finally the yellow airbag. So as you feed them through, kind of guide your hand through the backside, because you don't want to put any strain on the ribbon cable. So when they're all lined up, the ribbon cable should be perfect. So now the wires are out, right? And now we can line it. Now this is where that line that we part with the Sharpie marker, if you remember, was helpful, because now I can kind of see that line from inside. And I'm going to look at the wheel, and I'm going to look at the middle point of the wheel. Then I'm going to put it in right at the middle point, and making sure that the ribbon cable is free as well. Take your time here because the splines only go one way, so you gotta make sure they line up correctly. All right, there we go. Okay, so now it's in. All the cables come out. Take the gray plugs, plug them together. That's your cruise control. Feed them through the 2 little harnesses, and then pop it in here. This gets all the cables out of the way. This is important so nothing gets caught or snagged. There's your cruise control. This one goes to the airbag, so we'll leave that out. This is your ground cable, so feed this through this plug right here. And then with the little nub pointing up towards you, slide it in here until you hear a click. Okay, there's your click. So that cable's in. Most important, do not forget the 14mm bolt. So that's the bolt that goes into the steering wheel. Turn it by hand first. Make sure it's in correctly before you use any power, impact, or those type of things. But I just like to use my hand for something like this. So just tighten it back up. And lastly, we'll put the airbag back in. So that would be the last step. Okay, so that's nice and tight. If you're not used to this, I would put a rag right here to protect the carbon. But in my case, I'm just gonna hold it with my chest because I do this a lot. Put the plugs in, snap it until it locks in. Okay, then feed the airbag cable through here. And then hold the wheel. You're gonna slide this thing out and around the plastic. Like that. And this thing will just lock in place over here. There we go. So we're gonna put these cables through here. Oops. The key is all the cables have its own proper place, so don't just force something in. They all have its own correct place where things need to go. So make sure the cables are correctly positioned before you put the airbag on. Let's go in. Green and yellow. Okay, there we go. So they're all in. So everything's nice and tight. Now these two are the last two. This is what's held in place by your 2 Torx bits from the side here. So we're gonna line this up and just slide it back in. Make sure your horn works. Okay, the last step, just put the T30 bits back in. So this part, just use your hand, put the bit in the thing and just tighten back in. You do it by hand because you can feel when the bolt's going in. If you do it with a wrench, you won't feel it until it's too late. Now this car will be 50 more horsepower. All right, so we're also going to replace the shift knob with one of our carbon fiber countersunk shift knobs. These are weighted. It's countersunk. What a countersunk means is essentially the shaft, instead of sitting here at the top, it's going to sit into the shaft. So it's going to go in further into the shift knob. So by doing so, you're going to notice right now the shift point is right here. So right about this height. We're not doing a short shifter on this car. So let's take this knob off first. This is a factory knob. When you guys take this off, make sure you keep this in a safe place. This is a very expensive knob if you guys have tried to buy one before. So keep it in a safe place because if you ever sell the car, you may want to have it. So we're gonna unscrew it, okay? You notice the factory knob, because it locks, you need this lock nut, which also prevents it from sitting lower because you see the nuts right here. It's taking up almost like 1/2 millimeter. So with our shift knob, you don't need this lock nut anymore. So you just take it off. So just keep these two, zip lock it, put it in a bag. The new one doesn't require anything. So all you gotta do is screw it back on. And by doing so, watch how much lower it's gonna sit. So it's gonna touch the boot now. So now, earlier it was up here, right? Right by the plastic. Now you just dropped yourself almost 1 inch. So now you're sitting at the radial height. I mean, that's it. You don't have to do anything. It's an easy mod, full carbon. It matches the steering wheel. We also have the e-brake handle that also matches in carbon. But essentially, this piece right here does really nice. It does 2 functions. It looks nice, it feels nice. You know, most people like a round shift knob, and it sits much lower. So that's our carbon fiber countersunk shift knob. So next step is we're going to replace these two. So I guess we're going to have to take this knob off again, but we're going to replace it. All right, so we're back in the car. We're going to replace these two pieces in carbon. We actually make these now in 100% carbon, so you get to keep your stock pieces. So whether your stock ones are scratched up, you don't have them, they're cracked, now that doesn't matter anymore because we don't need your stock ones back as a core exchange. So to get these two pieces out, we need to remove this plastic console, all right? So to do that, since we switched over to this easy to remove shift knob, we're gonna pop this back off again. So just unscrew it, just make sure you don't drop it. Set that aside. To remove this console, use like a plastic trim tool. We're just gonna go in here. There's clips all around the console. So we're just gonna release the clips. And when we release the clips, you'll see the whole thing just kind of separates from itself. There's about, I think, 6 or 8 clips on this thing. When it's all released, we're going to pull the e-brake as high up as you can go because we're going to have to slide it out. You're going to lift it up and up like this way, tilt it forward, and reach underneath. There's 2 harnesses, one for the roof and one for the hazards. Just kind of reach in here and unplug them. And I'll show you how they unplug in a second. So that thing comes out, and now you lift it out. So we're going to go to the workbench to do this part. But for the plugs, these are the plugs I was reaching in for. There's 2 of them. So the plugs each have a little button. You just kind of depress on each one. So you reach in there, look for that thing, depress it, and it pops out. So you can plug these 2. So these are the carbon pieces that we're going to be swapping in. If you take a look at these real quick, I mean, they are carbon, 100% carbon. You can see. So we have all the bolt points, just 6 mini screws that hold this piece to the cover here. All right, so we're going to swap that out. And then there's 4 screws on this piece that goes in. So both pieces will be replaced. Now, this is a 2005 S2000 or 2004. 2004. Okay, 2004 and 2005, they don't have the defrost button for the rear. So when you order, you tell us you don't need it. If you have an 06 and up, you have another button here. We have a different trim piece for the 06 and up, 06 to 09 basically. All right, so now we get this thing out of the cart. The first thing we want to do is remove some Phillips screws. So the best way to do that, I like to start with the elbow pad. So there's 4 screws for the elbow pad. In this case, once the elbow pad's removed, you see this is the assembly we want to get to, is this right here. So we're going to remove a couple more screws. We got 2 screws here. So that separates like this. All right. So we'll tackle this trim piece first, then we'll come back and do this one. So we'll set this one aside. Now this piece, to get to this, you have to separate this plastic bucket from this metal piece, and there's 2 more screws for that. And that's these 2 little gold screws right here. So you can take one out on this side. All right, so now you got the piece, but this is what you're going to work on. Now, without touching anything, you look on the back side, you're going to see 3 of the screws exposed. Those are the 3 Phillips. There's 3 more if you keep sliding it. There's 3 more down here. All right. Now the trick is, you see this little metal thing right here? You don't want to pull this thing too far because if you unwind this thing, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So we're going to do the easy ones first. So we're going to take the 3 on the front out. All right. So do this all by hand. Don't use a power screwdriver because these are easy to strip because they're extremely small. And take a look how small that screw is. So those are the screws. So you got 6 of these. So 3 in the front, 3 in the back. So I'm going to take these out the front first. Just remember, don't pull it too far out. If you pull it too far out and that spring jumps out at you, then you're going to be trying to figure out how to fix it, which is not easy. All right, so that's going to be the 6. So now you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All of them are out. We're going to carefully flip it around, keeping the pressure on the back side now. All right, so now you can lift this piece out. And you can see that's where the screws go. All right, so we're going to put this piece aside. We're going to take the carbon one, keeping pressure on the back. Don't let go of it. Slide the new piece in. We made these as a direct replacement, so same thickness as the OEM pieces. I mean, it's a perfect fit. All right, so this can go in. Now we're going to flip the back around, keeping pressure on the back. Now we're going to put the screws back in. Same order as before. Now I'll slide back in. Now you complete it. You can see perfectly. It's like the OEM one. So now we're going to reverse the step, snap this thing back in. So on the sides, you got the 2 clips. Done now. So we'll set this aside. This piece is held in by 4 screws. So you flip it around. You're going to go after these screws right here, the 2 top ones right here, and then 1 here at the bottom, and then 1 over here. Now, just note that these screws are smaller than the other screws you're removing, so don't mix them up. Otherwise, you're gonna damage the plastic. So the four that hold the plastic trim are actually shorter. So make sure you pay attention to that. Now, to get to this last screw, I forgot, you have to remove this switch because it's covering it. These are the two screws for the switch itself. But the screw that holds the trim is hiding underneath it. And these are the longer screws, you see? So don't mix them up. The long ones, set them aside. The two long ones are with the screw. Pop that out, and there's that last screw. It's hidden underneath. See how this is shorter? So you want to keep the difference, at least the shortness. Okay. Flip it around, and the trim pieces are already falling off. So that's the trim. So set this aside, take the carbon one. Pop this back in. Flip it around. Put this one in first. Okay, well, these screws are back in, then you can just reverse the order and put all your switches back on, and then we'll put the glove box, or not the glove, the elbow pad back in. So here's your top-down switch. The funny thing is, all the S2000s, even the early model years of the AP2, they all have the hole cut off for the rear defrost. You can see that. So when they made the mold, they all have the rear defrost. But then in the 0405, they didn't put the defrost in, but the button is still there. So even though it's covered, it's merely the carbon fiber. You can see right through it, so the carbon is still there. So you have the hole. So now we got this piece all done. Looks nice. First thing we do is put this piece back on. So this piece lines up with this piece like that. Okay. So it should sit perfectly flush. Everything should line up. You can flip it around, and you got those 4 screws. And put the front ones in. There's 2 at the bottom, 2 at the top. So everything is 4 screws to put back. 4 for the elbow pad, 4 for the cup holder. And now it's all complete. So the old pieces. In this case, we're going to wrap these up, save it for in case you ever want to go back to stock, but there's your brand new pieces all ready to go. So we're going to put this back in the car. All right, so for today, we finished up the steering wheel. We did the AP2 carbon fiber trim pieces, and we did the countersunk shift knob, which I'll come down here. You can see how much lower it sits than stock. The next step we're going to do probably the radio door, because it's not finished yet. We're going to do the radio door in carbon. We're going to do the e-brake handle. And then we're going to come in and do the pull handles, which are these large suckers right here. We're going to do these in carbon fiber as well. So that'll be in a next episode. But thank you for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this quick little episode on this 2005 Grand Prix White. Or actually 2004, I keep saying 05. I think the owner has plans to do some CR parts on it. He's got a CR wing coming. He's got a CR front lip. It's going to look really nice when it's all finished up. It's got the CR wheels on here. So a really clean overall car. And for a Grand Prix White on tan, you don't see many of these things. So definitely a nice looking ride. If you guys have any questions or comments, please post. And as always, we appreciate the support and thanks for watching.